Girl wakes up from coma, looks at dad and says, "You're not supposed to be here." The night enveloped everything, leaving only the sound of the wind howling in the quiet space, along with the steady hum of the car engine in the silence. Mark, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, was driving the car towards the hospital in extreme tension. Tonight, his heart was pushed to the brink of anxiety and hope. He just received the call he had been waiting for. His daughter, Julia, after a long month in a coma due to a horrific traffic accident, has woken up. But there was no complete joy when those words echoed on the phone. Only a vague feeling between relief and worry remained. His heart raced, his breath became hurried, and his fingers on the steering wheel couldn't stop trembling. Each step in this night feels like a battle with anticipation, with conflicting thoughts swirling in his mind. What will his daughter be like when she wakes up? Will she remember anything about that accident? And can the pain from the past days make her continue to stand strong in life? In each of those moments, Mark felt both a fragile hope and a tormenting fear, like a wave crashing violently against the shore. Questions about life and death, about hope and pain, kept following one another in his mind, causing his eyes to blur and the path ahead to seem endlessly long. Mark rushed into the hospital, breathing heavily with only the image of his daughter Julia lying on the hospital bed after many long days in the dark in his mind. He hoped that when he saw his daughter again, everything would return to normal, and the warm feeling of reunion would dispel all worries. But when he stepped into the hospital room, something felt off and immediately invaded his mind. Julia, with wide open eyes, looked at him in panic. Not the joyful gaze of someone waking up from a coma, but fear, as if she were facing something he couldn't see. Mark's heart sank as she whispered weakly, "Dad, Dad, someone is watching me. Dad, please leave. Don't stay here." Her words made him tremble. His whole body felt like it was being shattered. Those words were like lightning tearing through the dark night, causing all hope within him to suddenly vanish. Mark tried to step closer, but his heart grew heavier. Why did Julia say that? Why is she afraid of him, the father who has always been her solid support? Mark felt a wave of anxiety rising within him, like a tide crashing against the shore without cease. Every ounce of reason in him said he had to find out why. But in that moment, he couldn't leave his daughter for even a second. He stopped, his eyes looking at Julia with worry, a feeling of helplessness rising within him, and he could only try to comfort her, even though he didn't understand why she was reacting that way. Just as Mark tried to approach his daughter, a gentle yet confident voice came from the door. Dr. Patel, the one in charge of Julia's treatment, walked into the hospital room. She was a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor and professional gaze, but Mark couldn't help but notice the worry hidden deep within her eyes. She quickly approached Julia, gently placing her hand on the girl's shoulder as a way to calm the panic. "Dr. Patel, don't you see? My daughter." "She doesn't resemble the other patients," Mark said, his voice trembling but filled with anxiety. "She is too scared, not just what I've seen from those who wake up from a coma." Dr. Patel nodded, trying to remain calm to explain. "This is a phenomenon we often encounter in patients who wake up after a long period of coma. They may fall into a state of delirium, sometimes not fully aware of their surroundings, and sometimes have exaggerated reactions to normal things. Julia might be going through this phase." Mark was not completely convinced. The feeling of unease still lingered within him. During Julia's treatment process, he had encountered many comatose patients and witnessed various recoveries. But Julia's gaze at that moment, the sheer terror she displayed, made him feel that something was amiss. She was not only terrified of the invisible shadows around her, but also kept mentioning a name with a haunting expression. Dr. Carlson. That name kept echoing in her fragmented speech as if it carried an indelible threat. Mark couldn't help but worry as a thought gradually emerged in his mind. Who is Dr. Carlson? And why does this name scare Julia so much? The feeling of restlessness grew stronger, making him unable to just stand still and accept the doctor's explanation. There is something deeper that he has yet to understand. The entire hospital room suddenly fell silent, as if weighed down by an indescribable tension. At that very moment, the door opened again, and a tall doctor stepped in. He was wearing medical scrubs with contact lenses obscuring his eyes, but as soon as he appeared, Julia had a surprising reaction. She recoiled, her eyes wide with fear, and from her throat came a panicked scream. "He will kill me! He will kill me!" Her voice was not only filled with fear, but also sounded lost, as if she were struggling with a terrifying nightmare. Mark, feeling his heart pounding to the point of suffocation, rushed to Julia's side. He saw Dr. Carlson, the doctor whose name he had only heard from Julia, holding a syringe in his hand. His actions were cold and decisive, as if there was nothing to think about or hesitate over. Mark didn't have time to understand what was happening, but as soon as he saw the syringe, a surge of anger erupted within him. "Don't go near my daughter," Mark growled, his voice like a cornered beast. In that moment, a father's protective instinct flared up stronger than ever. He rushed towards Dr. Carlson, ignoring any attempts to stop him. Julia was still trembling, her face pale and her eyes constantly darting towards the doctor, filled with panic. Dr. Carlson did not have any unexpected reaction to Mark's actions. He just stood still, the doctor's gaze revealing determination, but at the same time containing something mysterious that Mark could not comprehend. The conflict had begun, not just a match between two people, but also a confrontation between doubts, protection, and something dark that was shrouding Julia. In that tense moment, Mark knew that things were no longer as simple as he thought, and he had to do everything to protect his daughter, no matter who or what he had to face. Mark no longer had the patience to think any further. In a frenzy, he yanked the syringe from Dr. Carlson's hand, causing it to fall to the floor with a sharp clink. His mind was consumed by a single thought: protect his daughter. He quickly turned, shouted for security, and in the blink of an eye, medical staff burst in from the hallway, pushing Dr. Carlson outside. A brief struggle ensued, but just a few seconds later, the doctor was subdued and taken out of the room. When everything calmed down, the atmosphere was still heavy and tense. Mark turned back to look at Julia, feeling relieved for having averted the danger, but also deeply worried to see his daughter still sobbing uncontrollably. Julia covered her face, her body trembling as tears continued to fall. When she gradually caught her breath, Julia's red eyes stared intently at Mark, and through choked sobs, she revealed a horrifying truth. "Dad! Dad! It was him! He is the one who put me into a coma," Julia said, her voice soft like a confession, but heavy and full of pain. "Dr. Carlson is the one who injected me, kept me in an unconscious state for the past month. I can't do anything. Cannot wake up," he said. "He would never let you wake up." Mark stood frozen, unable to comprehend what he had just heard. Every word Julia said felt like a knife stabbing into his heart. Dr. Carlson, whom he had thought was a dedicated doctor, was the one who had plunged his daughter into this nightmare. Julia continued to recount, each memory flooding back like fragmented pieces in her mind. She recalled Dr. Carlson's voice, cold and terrifying, along with the threats she could never forget. "You will never wake up." Tim Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach when he heard those words. A feeling of anger surged within him, but at the same time, there was confusion, not knowing what to do to protect his daughter. Everything, from the moment Julia woke up until now, was not at all like what he had imagined. It turns out that behind the alertness of a doctor, there was a ruthless conspiracy hidden, making Mark unable to believe what his eyes were seeing. The truth that Julia just revealed made Mark unable to sit still. He decided to investigate Dr. Carlson himself, the doctor whom he had always thought was dedicated and professional. Unable to believe what had happened, Mark began to sift through all the information, searching for a connection between Dr. Carlson and the accident that Julia had encountered. He had no idea that what he was about to discover would completely change his perception of the incident. When delving into the files and documents, Mark suddenly noticed a strange coincidence. Dr. Carlson not only treated Julia throughout her illness, but he was also present at the scene of the traffic accident that left his daughter in a coma. The deeper he dug, the more Mark discovered that Dr. Carlson was the one who caused the accident, and everything seemed to have been meticulously planned. He was a renowned doctor in the hospital, a person of great power whom no one dared to suspect. To cover up his crime, he exploited his own position to approach Julia and sedated her, keeping her in a comatose state for an entire month without anyone noticing. Mark could hardly breathe when he realized that Dr. Carlson had done all these things just because he was afraid that Julia would remember him as the one who was driving in the accident. In a panic and trying to cover up his crime, Dr. Carlson used his power and position in the hospital to inject Julia with drugs, making sure she would never wake up and tell the truth. He is not just a doctor, but also a manipulator, exploiting every situation to protect himself. Each piece of truth gradually came together in Mark's mind, and anger mixed with pain enveloped him. How could a person use power and authority to conceal such a great sinful act? And now, as everything gradually becomes clear, Mark knows that he will have to fight not only to protect Julia, but also to uncover all the dark secrets that Dr. Carlson has kept hidden for so long. The anger within Mark surged like a violent wave, sweeping away all his calm thoughts. He couldn't accept the fact that a doctor, someone he and Julia had trusted for so many years, could be such a cruel enemy. He not only harmed your daughter, but also used his power to cover up his malicious actions. Mark wanted to scream, wanted to tear apart all the secrets and have justice served, but felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. How could he confront such a powerful person, someone who had skillfully used every trick to protect themselves from being discovered? But at the same time, a pain that cannot be expressed in words also arose in his heart. In fact, the truth he uncovered was not only a shock about Dr. Carlson's character, but also a devastating blow to the trust that Mark and Julia had placed in those around them. He wondered, how could he not have noticed the signs, the ambiguous behaviors early on? He blamed himself for not realizing that his protection, sometimes too blind, was actually a factor that allowed bad people to take advantage. The feeling of guilt and inner turmoil made Mark feel like he was standing between two opposing worlds. On one hand, he wants to confront Dr. Carlson, to expose all the crimes he has committed. But on the other hand, he also had to face himself, the mistakes of the past, the decisions that led to Julia falling into the hands of the villain. The feeling of helplessness when seeing his daughter endure pain in silence shattered his heart into pieces. Mark knows he cannot let Dr. Carlson get away with this crime, but he also understands that it will not be simple. Every decision he makes will be a struggle not only against the enemy out there, but also against his own conflicting feelings, the deep pain within himself. Although Julia had to face a painful and dark past, as the truth gradually emerged, she no longer immersed herself in the fear and nightmares left by Dr. Carlson. At first, the memories of the accident and what he had done still haunted her, but gradually she realized that she could not let the past dictate her future. She woke up not just from the long sleep induced by anesthesia, but also from the darkness within her soul. Julia began to learn how to confront the pain she had experienced. She didn't let the terrible memories knock her down. Instead, she decided to be stronger and take back control of her own life. Although her body was still weak and tired after a long time in bed, her spirit began to recover day by day. She found strength within herself, a strength she had never recognized before. Every day, Julia fights not only with physical wounds, but also with fear and doubts about her ability to recover. She began attending therapy sessions, learning how to stand firm on her own feet, not just to walk, but also to stand strong in life. Although the road ahead is still long and full of challenges, she understands that only she can change her own destiny. And throughout this process, she gradually realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite the fear still being there. Julia no longer let the past dictate her. She has started to recover, not only physically, but also mentally, stronger and more resilient than ever. After Mark requested an immediate investigation, the dark secrets about Dr. Carlson began to gradually be revealed. The truth is no longer hidden in the dark. The investigations were conducted swiftly, and evidence was continuously gathered, from forged medical records to systematically erased logs. By the time the police investigated and found the connection between Dr. Carlson and the accident, everything was clear. He was not only Julia's doctor, but also the one who caused the accident she encountered, using his power and position to manipulate and cover up the crime. When the evidence became undeniable, Dr. Carlson was hastily arrested by the authorities. All the truths about him, about the cruel actions he has committed over the past time, have finally come to light. He is no longer a famous doctor, but just a cunning criminal, someone who exploits people's trust to serve his dark schemes. Mark and Julia couldn't help but feel an indescribable relief upon realizing that they had finally been freed from the threat of someone they had previously trusted. The anxiety and fear which had gnawed at their family were now gradually receding. Mark looked at his daughter. Her eyes seemed to have brightened significantly, as if she had found the light at the end of the dark tunnel she had been through. Although the wounds in their hearts have not yet fully healed, at least a part of their lives has been restored. Both of them know that life cannot return to exactly as it was before, but the truth has been revealed and justice has been served. Now, they can move forward on the path of recovery, stronger and freer, no longer threatened by the shadow of Dr. Carlson. When the truth was finally revealed and Dr. Carlson was dealt with, Mark and Julia began to rebuild their lives from the fragments. Although the past still lingers in indelible memories, they have found the strength to start anew. Mark, with all that he has been through, promised his daughter that he would always be by her side, protecting her at all costs. He swore he would never let anything or anyone hurt her again. His commitment is not just a promise, but also a deep belief, a protection from the bottom of his heart that he has for Julia. As for Julia, the girl who was once weak, panicked, and engulfed in fear, she has now changed remarkably. The days of facing nightmares, the painful memories of abuse and crime have gradually receded, making way for a stronger, more confident, and resilient Julia. She no longer lives in the shadow of fear. Instead, she began stepping out into the world, looking at everything with a different perspective. She understood that the past could not determine her future, and that she was the one who truly held the reins of her life. Step by step, Julia found joy again, found faith in life and in herself. She not only recovered physically, but also grew spiritually, becoming a girl Mark could be proud of. She learned to accept the past, but not let it control her. And Mark, once a worried father, now feels more at ease seeing his daughter gradually revive, not only physically, but also in spirit. Their lives have changed, no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past, but instead opening a new chapter, a chapter where love and protection have helped them rise, stronger and freer than ever. Together they move forward, ready to face all the challenges ahead, with the belief that each new day is an opportunity to heal, to change, and to love. The story ends in an emotional moment as Mark tightly embraces Julia in his arms, clearly feeling the immense happiness welling up in his heart. After months of anxiety, tension, and long nights soaked in tears, they have finally been freed from the nightmare caused by Dr. Carlson. No longer haunted by the shadows of the past, no longer waiting for the lurking fears, Mark and Julia can finally step into new life, free and full of hope. Julia looked up at her father, feeling the boundless love he had for her. She understood that despite having gone through countless hardships, her father's love was the most steadfast thing, the light that illuminated the darkest moments. That is the only thing that helps her overcome all challenges, the indispensable source of strength for her to stand up and start over from scratch. She no longer feels lonely in this world, because she knows that no matter what happens, her father will always be her protector, her companion by her side. With their hands tightly clasped together, They step into the future, no longer afraid, no longer worried about the past. They walked with renewed hope, believing that life would bring them opportunities for love and happiness to rebuild what was lost. And in that moment, they realized that love, protection, and hope were the only things necessary to heal all wounds, to renew life, and to face the future.